You call this analysis? My wife snapped, her voice slicing through the conference room like broken glass. This is trash. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just waved her hand like I was a bad smell and leaned across the table. In one theatrical motion, she dragged my laptop toward her, hovered over the touchpad, and clicked delete. A small gasp from one of the junior partners, a scoff from the director of ops. But mostly, silence, the kind that weighs on your ribs. A few smirks flickered, cowardly ones from the usual suspects. Guys who laugh not because it's funny, but because they're scared to be the next target. The presentation was for the firm's largest merger in 5 years. I'd worked on it for 3 months. Nights, weekends, red-eye spreadsheets that bled into policy docs. It wasn't just a risk analysis. It was the analysis, and she knew it. Of course she did. We'd gone over it together. She'd complimented it in private, called it clean, sharp, bulletproof. But in public, she needed a head to roll. And apparently mine was closest. I didn't say a word. Not because I was stunned. No, I'd been waiting, preparing, testing the weight of this exact moment in my mind for weeks. I closed my laptop slowly, the air too thick with her cologne and everyone's cowardice. I adjusted my cuffs, stood up, and smiled. Not a fake smile. Not the brittle one I wore when she interrupted me at dinner parties. This one had teeth. I walked out of the boardroom without another glance. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone, opened a secure messaging app, and typed the line I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times. Accepting your $700,000 offer. I'm in. Then I hit send. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a trigger. They say more than 97% of people just watch and never subscribe, but if you're one of the few who actually wants more stories like this, hit that subscribe button. It really does help us build more of these, and we put in real hours for every twist. Anyway, the drive afterward felt like exhaling for the first time in years. 3 towns over, I parked in front of a plain brick building with blacked-out windows. My name was already on the mailbox. I unlocked the apartment, stepped inside, and didn't even bother turning on the lights at first. I just stood there, alone, free, not broken, activated. The apartment wasn't much. Bare carpet, IKEA table, mini fridge stocked with sparkling water and black coffee pods. But it was mine. I reached into my duffel and pulled out 3 things. A burner phone, a contract folder, and a navy suit that didn't match anything I'd worn at the old place. On the kitchen counter, my laptop blinked awake. No corporate firewalls, no shared cloud, just a clean machine and a fresh connection. I logged into a private email chain that spanned 6 weeks. Subject line, Strategic Transition Framework. The sender, a Fortune 500 competitor. They didn't want me for office politics. They wanted the systems I designed. The ones I built while she played office queen. The frameworks she never understood but pretended to own. The merger they were chasing. My models predicted the risk exposure better than anyone. And the CEO of the rival firm saw it. He didn't say, join us. He said, lead it. Offer signed. Start date? Tomorrow. Onboarding complete. Relocation package wired. My office keycard was already delivered to the apartment mailbox downstairs. I took a shower that night without the sound of someone reminding me to just stay in my lane. I slept without needing to explain my worth in a house where performance wasn't measured in quiet contributions, but in who could humiliate whom the fastest in front of witnesses. She thought she deleted a report. She deleted the guy holding the net. And the thing about nets, they don't make noise when they're gone, until you fall. The apartment smelled like new paint and vacuumed carpet, generic, sanitized, and just sterile enough to feel like a reset. I didn't bring much, just 1 large duffel bag and a carry-on. No framed photos, no anniversary mug, no world's best husband crap I never asked for in the first place. Everything I brought had purpose. Everything I left behind was a choice. The lease was in my name, not our name, not some shared address on a tax return. Mine. Set up 4 weeks ago under an LLC I'd registered 2 years earlier when I first got the itch that something was off. A shell company. Berkwood Analytics. Legitimate enough for a lease application. Quiet enough to not ping her radar. I dropped the bag on the couch and pulled out the essentials. Burner phone, labeled only Vanco 2 in Sharpie. A manila folder with embossed contract pages still crisp from the courier. And a navy blue suit she once told me made me look too ambitious. I laid it out on the bed like armor. I opened my laptop, my personal one, not the one IT tracked like a jealous ex, and logged into the secure channel. 6 weeks of emails, encrypted threads, strategic blueprints, redline edits, compensation proposals. I scrolled through them slowly, a calm satisfaction building in my chest. The deal was done. Final offer, $700,000 base, plus bonus incentives tied to market disruption. They weren't hiring me as a project manager or consultant. They were bringing me in as a scalpel, a weapon, the guy who knew where the old firm's soft tissue lived. Not because I was vindictive, but because I built most of it. I clicked into the last email. From the CEO himself. Time-stamped 23 minutes ago. Subject: welcome aboard. Body: room ready. Whiteboard clean. See you tomorrow. No emojis. No fluff. Just intent. My role? Lead architect of the same market pivot my ex-wife had just humiliated me over in the boardroom. The irony wasn't lost on me. She thought I was some boring data guy, clinging to a spreadsheet like a raft. What she didn't know was that I'd already switched ships. Quietly, strategically, and the storm she'd kicked up was mine to surf. There was something poetic about installing my own coffee machine in that new kitchen. A small one, matte black, single serve, no frother. I made the first cup that night and stared out the window while it hissed. This was the kind of apartment where no one asks you questions. The kind of building where men rent for a reason and never leave notes. I liked that. I sat at the desk by the window and opened the folder. The offer letter was still warm from the courier's van. I ran my fingers along the signature line. Thomas R. Mayfield. Not Tom. Not Babe. Not can you run this by me quick. Just the name I was born with and the one I'd used to sign a salary 6 times higher than what I'd made under her shadow. The final page wasn't about money, it was the clause that mattered. Non-compete exclusions. Meaning, I could speak, consult, advise, even testify if asked. Legally, I was bulletproof. She hadn't just insulted me, she had fired the only bullet that could have hit me. And missed. At 2:11 a.m., my burner buzzed. A single message from a contact labeled Renegade, our internal code for the lead strategist at the rival firm. They announced the merger window at 9 a.m. Be ready. I didn't respond. I just locked the screen and smiled. Not a big smile. Not smug. Just quiet. Purposeful. Like a man standing at the edge of a chessboard while the other players still bragging about pawns. I went to bed without setting an alarm. My body knew what tomorrow meant. While she would be scrambling to cover the hole I'd left, I'd be walking into a different office. Sharper, faster, more lethal. With people who didn't just hear my ideas, they paid for them. There was no heartbreak. No grief. Just clarity. The kind that only shows up when you stop begging to be seen and start moving where you're wanted. She strutted into the Monday morning ops sink like nothing had happened. Cream blazer, too tight smile. Coffee cup from that overpriced cafe she only visited when she wanted to feel superior. To her, the incident in the boardroom was already ancient history. She'd put on a little performance, gotten some laughs, put her husband in check, and now back to business. Except business wasn't playing along. It started quietly. A notification in the legal queue, voluntary termination Thomas R. Mayfield. Timestamped Saturday evening. Standard exit, submitted through the internal portal. But when the automated workflow hit the system, flags started popping. First, legal, then compliance, then treasury. By 10 a.m., 3 separate departments had escalated questions to the general counsel. By 10:30, there was a hastily assembled call with legal, compliance, finance, and IT. No PowerPoint, just one question no one had an answer for. Who's the active named officer on the Havenridge portfolio? Someone cleared their throat and muttered the name like it tasted bitter. Thomas Mayfield. And with that, the silence fell. She didn't hear about it until 11:13 a.m., during her weekly check-in with the head of strategic growth. Mid-sentence, he paused, frowned at something on his screen, then asked, "Did Thomas actually resign? Or is this some dramatic delay tactic?" Her eyes narrowed. "He's just pouting. I'm sure he'll be back. He always." "He submitted a formal notice," the man interrupted. "Effective immediately. Legal's combing through the contract chain now. Apparently, he's the named officer on 5 of our 9 active deal structures." Her throat dried mid-sip. 5. She tried to pivot. "Well, reassign them. It's a formality. Let's move." But it wasn't. Not this time. Thomas hadn't just been a background analyst. He had been, without most people realizing it, the compliance cornerstone for 3 ongoing deals and 2 pre-approvals. Not because he lobbied for power, but because no one else wanted the liability. He took the job no one else wanted. Quietly, meticulously, every approval, every vendor file, every jurisdictional review, his initials, his signature, his encryption key. She didn't even have his passcode. IT tried to pull backups, but 3 of the systems were hybrid, part on-prem, part sandboxed in a private cloud only Thomas had maintained. Documentation? Sure, some, but not the kind you could hand off in a day. One system flagged an integration delay. Another froze pending identity re-verification. She brushed it off, tried to stay composed. Get DevOps on it. Send it to legal. Just resolve it. Then came the client call. The client. The one with the massive energy merger, expected to close within the month. Her golden ticket. Her legacy. The client CFO, sharp as ever, skipped the pleasantries. We noticed Thomas Mayfield's name is missing from this week's compliance report. Can you clarify who's signing off on the ENC disclosures now? She fumbled. It's being restructured. I'm heading that now. Pause. I see. Well, unless we have continuity from the original officer of record, or a certified delegate, we're pausing progress. We've also engaged external counsel to verify indemnity obligations. Translation. You lost your guy, and now we don't trust you. By 2 p.m., she was in the executive suite, pacing in heels, whisper shouting into her phone, flipping between calls with legal and HR. They kept repeating the same phrases. We can't override his sign-off without board action. The compliance trail runs through his digital certificate. He never gave anyone else proxy access. Her face twitched. He hadn't stormed out. He'd vacuum-sealed his exit. Worse, he hadn't made noise. Hadn't sent a dramatic email. No "you'll miss me when I'm gone" speech. No files sabotaged. No data wiped. Everything was clean, legal, documented, executed. Like someone who didn't just leave, but planned the leaving. That was when panic crept in, not because of what he'd taken, but because of how confidently he had taken nothing. He didn't take revenge. He took structure. And now, everything she stood on was cracking. By Tuesday morning, she had her spin rehearsed like a Broadway understudy ready to steal the lead. He was under a lot of pressure. She told the board liaison over croissants and fake concern. Brilliant, but, quiet types hold it all in. The builds. Snaps. She made it sound tragic. I was apparently a tragic little man who cracked under the weight of my own spreadsheets. HR heard the same story. So did legal. So did the director of comms, who was quietly instructed to prepare a contingency statement in case personal issues leaked. She even added a few performative sides to her performance. How difficult it had been to work with me lately, how emotionally distant I'd become, how I'd stopped being a team player after Q2. She wore worry like perfume. Enough to waft into every conversation, but not enough to mask the rot underneath. It almost worked, until someone in HR decided to do what they're actually paid for. The audit began with a simple request: Thomas Mayfield's file. Not his deliverables, not his memos, his personnel file. It was supposed to support her narrative that I was erratic, emotionally volatile, maybe even insubordinate. A record of disciplinary flags, passive-aggressive emails, missed deadlines. Instead, the file was pristine. No reprimands, no flags, 0 complaints. Peer reviews consistently above average. Client commendations, not just solid sterile. Not a single HR red mark in 7 years. One page even featured handwritten notes from a senior partner. Tom's analysis saved us from 2 massive exposures. Get him into escrow policy writing ASAP. And just like that, the cracks in her story started bleeding. Then legal took a closer look. And what they found sent a jolt straight up the chain. Turns out, the very escrow framework that underpinned the energy merger, the one worth mid-9 figures, had my name stamped across every clause. I hadn't just been a contributor. I wrote the framework. From scratch. 6 months ago. Quietly. While she was busy booking offsites and curating Slack emojis. Even worse, I had done it at her suggestion. She pitched it to the board, then passed the actual work to me, told me to make it shine, and promptly forgot I existed the moment she got her credit. Now legal was realizing that the guy she publicly humiliated and called unstable had actually been the silent architect of the company's most delicate financial instrument. But the killing blow came from IT. A junior tech, probably overcaffeinated and underpaid, digging through cached backups for anything that might save the internal deadline. He wasn't even looking for proof, just trying to reconstruct a report. And he found it, buried in a temp folder, last modified during that infamous boardroom meeting. My report, the one she deleted with a smirk. It wasn't just intact, it was flawless. Layered scenario modeling, vendor threshold triggers, regulatory edge case simulations. All risk projections mapped, backed, and timestamped. Perfect forecast. Exactly what the client had asked for. The junior forwarded it to his manager. The manager forwarded it to legal. Legal sent it to the board packet for review. By Thursday, the questions started. Why was this report deleted? Who approved the dismissal of the author? Why weren't these projections shared with the client team? The answers didn't exist. And for the first time, her confidence faltered. In the break room, people whispered louder. On calls, her tone turned brittle. The same department heads who laughed with her on Friday now couldn't make eye contact. One even dared to say, mid-meeting, "I thought we were using Thomas's projections on this, are we not?" She snapped. Hard. Too hard. Voice raised. Tone sharp. It didn't land. It boomeranged. And behind closed doors, the board had started drafting a new word. Exposure. Not because of the merger. Because of her. She tried to redirect. To pivot. "He's working for a competitor now," she whispered during strategy calls. Probably planted this whole narrative. But even that theory unraveled fast. Because the facts weren't leaking out. They were leaking up. From inside. The walls weren't closing in. They were leaning. And she was standing dead center. The office wasn't flashy. Clean lines, glass walls, dark wood desk with no clutter. But it radiated power the way an expensive watch does. Subtle, precise, impossible to ignore. The kind of space where strategy isn't spoken aloud. It's implied in the silence. I stepped into it at 8:45 a.m. sharp. Same suit I'd laid out 2 nights ago. The one she hated. The one that, apparently, made me look like I was trying too hard. Turns out, trying wasn't the problem. The CEO met me in the hallway personally. Not an assistant, not an HR coordinator. Him. Mark Tallon. Mid-50s, crisp voice, sharp tie, handshake like a closing bell. "Thomas," he said, shaking my hand with zero hesitation. "We've been looking forward to this for a while. Not welcome aboard. Not first day nerves. Looking forward to this. Because this wasn't onboarding. It was deployment." He gestured to the glass-walled office beside his mine. Fresh nameplate already slid into place. T. Mayfield, Director of Strategic Integration. Below it, in smaller text, Client Systems and M&A Intelligence. Fancy way of saying, the guy who knows where the bodies are buried and how deep they're stacked. I walked in, dropped my bag, and looked around. There were already 3 folders waiting on my desk, each tagged with a blue post-it. Vendor chains / legacy risk / merger map. At the top of the first one, the client name from the deal my ex-wife was fumbling back at the old firm. It wasn't just any merger. It was the merger. The one she made her crown jewel. The one I'd built the risk framework for. The one she tried to erase. Now, we were underbidding. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. Out of design. The CEO sat across from me in the office, no fanfare, no lecture. Just laid out the real reason I was here. "You weren't just hired, Thomas," he said, cracking open a water bottle. "You were extracted." He slid a tablet across the desk. On it, an internal dashboard. Side-by-side comparison of current bids from competing firms, including hers and our own. Ours was leaner, smarter, pre-approved through a third-party vendor I'd brought in 6 weeks ago as a friend of a friend. I wasn't poaching deals. I was remapping the pipeline before she even realized it had a leak. They'd already filed preliminary intent. And thanks to a carefully timed trigger in the compliance chain I helped draft years ago, her firm's bid was about to hit a wall, my wall. The CEO leaned forward, lowered his voice just enough. "She tried to make an example out of you," he said. "But examples go viral, especially when they're smart, silent, and land on the right side of execution." He wasn't wrong. Word had started to circulate. Not loud gossip, but subtle questions. Executives reaching out on LinkedIn. Private DMs. A reporter from a mid-tier finance blog pinged me the night before. Off the record. What really happened in that boardroom? I didn't reply, because I didn't need to. I was in a new seat now. Across town. She was probably still trying to stitch together a compliance trail with my name ripped out of it like a tumor. Legal was circling. Clients were asking pointed questions. And we were moving. The new team handed me a transition brief over lunch. 5 analysts, 2 project managers, and a dedicated legal liaison. All mine. All briefed. All NDA to hell and back. They didn't ask me to share old firm secrets. Didn't have to. I wasn't there to spill gossip. I was there to replace her. And it wasn't even personal. It was math. See, I'd built systems at the old place not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted things to work. I automated redundancy checks, mapped vendor inconsistencies, tagged high-risk dependencies. She called it overkill. Here, they called it leverage. And then, late in the afternoon, came the proof. A Slack ping from my new legal contact. FYI, legacy firm's risk model failed initial audit. Your flagged vendor discrepancy was the issue. Nice catch. The model she based her deal on, the one she gutted after deleting my report, had failed before it ever hit the client's desk. Because she didn't know that one of the vendors had changed internal ownership last quarter. I did. I tagged it. Quietly. As always. But now my tag was her tripwire. That night, as I left the office, I passed a screen in the lobby cycling through company wins. One headline stood out. Novasys quietly emerges as frontrunner for Westcore energy integration. Novasys. My new badge read Novasys. And the integration. Mine to lead. She'd deleted the wrong file. And underestimated the one guy who never needed the spotlight to own the room. She walked into the Wednesday morning projection review like a monarch returning from exile. Chin high, lips tight, ready to reclaim control. She even made a show of adjusting the projector herself. Like she was grounded, approachable, in charge of the details. Her team nodded along. Not out of loyalty, but inertia. People don't challenge the person who just humiliated her husband in public, unless they have a reason. They were about to get several. Her first slide was fine. Broad trends. Market chatter. A few outdated charts padded with generic buzzwords. Then came the breakdown, Phase 1 forecasts, vendor migration timelines, platform risk scores. And that's when it collapsed. The moment she switched to the second tab, the screen went dead. Not black, just blank. A gray, unrendered spreadsheet with red flags in half the columns. Source errors. Broken formulas. Missing inputs. She froze for a beat too long. Is this the right file? Someone asked gently. It's the version legal approved, she snapped, then turned to her senior data analyst. Why is the foundational sheet missing? He hesitated. We pulled it from the compliance sandbox, but the integration points were tied to Tom's framework. We assumed you'd migrated those already. I told you to reassign everything weeks ago. No, he said. You told us not to wait around for Tom's breadcrumbs. Silence. She recovered, barely, blamed the tech team, called it a permissions error, promised to circle back with the integration leads, and moved to the next slide. But the damage was done. The client lead, attending via video, sat stiffly, face unreadable. Not offended, not aggressive, just unimpressed. Then, as the meeting wrapped, the client said something that cracked the entire floor beneath her. Is it true Thomas Mayfield's now heading strategy at Novasys? She blinked. Excuse me? Someone forwarded a LinkedIn post. The client continued, tilting their screen to show a shared article. He's listed as the lead integration strategist for the Westcore bid. You're bidding against them, yes. She cleared her throat. I can't speak to personnel decisions at other firms. But it was too late. Everyone in the room on and off screen was now seeing the same thing. I wasn't just gone. I was opposite. Novasys. Same sector. Same client group. Same deal. Different logo. Her logo. Now vulnerable. When the meeting ended, she practically sprinted back to her office, heels clipping the tile like gunshots. She slammed the door, locked it, then called legal, demanded to know how this had happened, why they hadn't blocked me, enforced a non-compete, initiated a cease and desist. Legal's answer was short, deadly. There was no non-compete. You approved its removal in 2022, during performance realignments. It's in your notes. A pause. I did. You said you didn't want to limit strategic mobility. Translation. You gave him the knife and told him where your blind spot was. While she was still spinning, the audit began. Quietly, a compliance officer flagged 3 instances where client frameworks had been altered without updated legal sign-offs. Guess who built the original sign-offs? Me. Guess who could no longer access the system to validate them? Also me. The board didn't speak up, yet, but the pattern was clear. Her power wasn't being taken. It was disintegrating. Not from one dramatic moment, but from exposure, like black mold behind a perfectly painted wall. And then came the internal comms leak. A Slack screenshot. Just one line from a mid-level staffer in project finance. Didn't Tom build the entire vendor risk model for this deal? It spread like wildfire. Because no one answered. Because the answer was yes. And the people asking weren't bitter. They were scared. Because if the guy who actually knew where the risks were was now working for the other side, what did that mean for them? What did that mean for her? By the end of the week, 2 things were true. The client had requested an independent third-party review of all financial modeling. And her own data team had started copying her deputy on every deliverable just in case. She hadn't lost the war, but she'd lost gravity. And without it, everything around her was beginning to drift. The call came late. Not late at night, emotionally late. The kind of late that says, I've run out of ways to pretend I'm still in control. Thursday, 6:43 p.m. I was sitting on my new balcony, overlooking a quiet side street downtown, dinner cooling on the counter. Shoes off, tie loose, sleeves rolled. I hadn't thought about her in hours. And then the burner lit up. Unknown number. But I knew. Only one person would dial this line at sunset. I answered. No greeting. Just silence. And then her voice, thinner than I remembered. Hi. I said nothing. She took that as permission. Of course she did. People like her don't need green lights. Just the absence of a red one. I wasn't going to call. I figured you'd be expecting it eventually. Still nothing from me. She sighed, half laughing, like we were old friends who'd had a silly little misunderstanding. That involved her gutting me in front of a boardroom and deleting my work like it was spam mail. I know you're upset, she said, but I think we both know things got complicated. Maybe more than they needed to be. That word again. Complicated. Her favorite way of laundering accountability. Whenever she lied, manipulated, or bulldozed someone, she'd call it complicated, as if reality had just slipped. I waited. She inhaled slowly, trying to sound composed, like the version of herself she uses for investor briefings. But even through the static, I heard it, that tiny crack. Her voice dipped lower, softer. Did you do this to hurt me? That was the moment. Not when she humiliated me in front of the department heads. Not when she deleted my file. Not when she laughed. It was this, her asking that question, that cemented it. Because she still believed I was orbiting her. That everything I'd done since leaving was about her. As if I'd spent every minute plotting revenge like some cartoon villain in a basement full of monitors. She really thought she was the center of the story. I spoke for the first and only time. No, I said, calm, measured. I could have said 100 other things. Could have buried her in facts. Thrown back her insults word for word. But instead, you did this to yourself. I just stopped helping. Then I hung up. Didn't wait for her reply. Didn't care if she sobbed or screamed or threw her phone across the kitchen. Because none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that she finally heard it. Not an insult. Not a threat. Just the truth. She never built anything. She borrowed. From me. From people like me. Quiet operators who propped her up while she played queen. And now that scaffolding was gone. I tossed the burner onto the table and went back inside. Dinner was still warm. I poured a drink. Sat down. Fork in one hand, the contract expansion file in the other. While she spiraled through audit meetings, legal reviews, and board whisperings, I was reviewing next quarter's talent rollouts. She wasn't my problem. She was my proof. Proof that silence isn't weakness. That leaving isn't quitting. And that when the wrong person finally calls, you don't owe them a second of your voice. The memo dropped at 9:07 a.m. sharp. No warning, no context, no damage control, just a plain, surgical line in bold Arial. Effective immediately. The Westcore merger has been paused pending internal compliance review. No signature. No explanation. Just 2 paragraphs of cold legal precision that sliced the company's flagship project off at the knees. Every inbox lit up at once. At first, people assumed it was a clerical error. Some email template gone rogue. But then the Slack channels went quiet. Not silent, tight. One-line responses. Emojis disappearing. Threads being deleted mid-sentence. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's preparatory. The kind of silence that signals someone's about to get burned. She saw it minutes later. Walked into her office with a fresh coffee, sunglasses on top of her head, chatting about weekend travel, still clinging to the illusion that she had time. Then her assistant turned the monitor toward her and said, voice flat, "You'll want to read this." She didn't blink at first, just stared at the memo, like it might change if she waited long enough. Then she opened the leadership page on the corporate website. Her name, formerly in bold under Strategic Lead, M&A Integration, was gone. Just gone. Not reassigned. Not on leave. Just missing. A gray placeholder now sat where her bio used to be. Leadership under evaluation. By lunch, the whispers were official. The board had retained external counsel. Not HR counsel. Third party, high retainer, reputation triage type of counsel. The kind of firm that shows up when internal trust is broken and no one wants to touch the fallout with company letterhead. Inside the building, no one said her name aloud. They referred to her like a storm. Has anyone talked to her? Do we know if she's in the building? Are we still looping her on these? By mid-afternoon, something worse happened. Security footage leaked. Not publicly, not yet. But internally. It spread like gasoline under a lit match. A 10-second clip. Her, in the boardroom, smirking, leaning over the table, tapping on Thomas's laptop, and saying, "Clear as day. This report's garbage." Click, delete, and then she laughs. That was it. No context. Just 10 seconds of pure cinematic arrogance. The kind of clip interns screen record and share on burner TikTok accounts with captions like, "When you delete the wrong guy's work." It spread to department heads, project leads, even the front desk staff. The reactions were unanimous. Not rage. Not sympathy. Cringe. Because now everyone knew. The guy she humiliated didn't just walk out. He walked into the rival firm and turned her entire career into an open wound. The joke wasn't funny anymore. The bravado that once made her commanding now just looked desperate. Performative. Insecure. And now she was exposed. Not for a mistake, but for a pattern. For how she treated people when she thought no one would remember. For how she burned bridges thinking she'd never need to cross back over. That night, she tried to log into the deal portal. Her access was revoked. She called IT. They told her, politely, that legal had taken over ownership of all systems she previously administered. When she pushed back, the help desk manager, who'd once laughed at her jokes, simply said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to speak with you directly on this. Please direct all further questions to counsel." Not legal. Counsel. She hung up. For the first time in her career, she didn't walk down the hallway like she owned it. She sat in her office, blinds closed, light off, phone face down. No one knocked. No one checked in. No one cared. Somewhere on a back-channel thread, a junior analyst sent the clip again with a simple caption. Karma. Delivered in 1080p. And for once, she didn't control the narrative. Because this wasn't sabotage. It was consequence. By the time the CEO knocked on my door, I already knew. You could feel it in the hallway. Tension that had turned the corner into inevitability. The analysts moved quieter. The assistants smiled longer. Something had shifted. Not fast, not loud. Just fully. He didn't sit. Just stepped in, rested a knuckle on the edge of my desk, and said plainly, "Client's ready to proceed. Contingent on one condition." I didn't even look up yet. Just waited. "They want you as point," he finished. "Full lead. Sole contact." Their words. I looked up. "I'm in," I said. He nodded once, no flourish, and left. That's how real decisions happen. Without applause. The meeting was set for 2:30 p.m. Not virtual. In person. High-floor conference suite with floor-to-ceiling glass, water bottles with metal caps, pens that cost more than most people's shoes. I walked in 5 minutes early. They were already seated. 3 executives. Westcore Energy. The same men she'd spent 6 months courting. Wooing. Smiling through dinners she pretended to hate. Nodding through strategy sessions she barely understood. I knew each of them by name. I'd read their bios, studied their past mergers, tagged their behavioral tells in old CRM notes she never even glanced at. They recognized me immediately, but this time I wasn't trailing behind a woman with a presentation clicker. This time I was the lead. Thomas, the CFO said first, standing to shake my hand. Glad you could join. No mention of the past. No probing. Just the kind of handshake that says, we've already vetted the other side and we picked you. I took my seat, opened the file and laid out the new framework. Cleaner projections. Smarter contingency buffers. Vendor structure with no known conflicts. I even brought a one-page visual of legal cleanroom protocol. Something her team never managed to provide. They didn't ask questions. They took notes. It wasn't arrogance. It was readiness. They wanted someone who wouldn't crack under spotlight. Someone who wouldn't blame a tech team or melt under compliance pressure. Someone who wouldn't hit delete when things got uncomfortable. At the 30-minute mark, the lead counsel from Westcore said it plainly. We're comfortable moving forward with your team. No preamble. No polite hedging. The deal wasn't just back on. It was ours. Sealed. Executed. Paperwork printed on cream stock, notarized by a woman who couldn't stop smiling when she saw the names listed. Mine at the top, hers nowhere to be found. After they left, I stayed behind. Just a few minutes. Let the quiet soak in. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo. I thought about how she'd planned to stand here. Same chairs, same water bottles, same skyline. Probably imagined it in her head over and over. The moment she'd finalize the deal and walk out with boardroom praise, maybe even a write-up in some bland business journal she pretended not to care about. Instead, her name had been pulled from the project files 3 days earlier. Not fired. Not reprimanded. Just erased. The way irrelevant data is purged from a system once the logic tree changes. No mess. Just deletion. That night, back in my office, the CEO stepped in again. This time with a single page. The deal closure confirmation. You didn't just close it, he said. You changed the leverage model for the next 3 quarters. Then quieter. I'm betting this is only the beginning. I didn't answer. Just looked at the signature line where my name sat in blue ink. While she sat in a glass office across town, watching her project move forward without her, probably refreshing her inbox, waiting for a rescue that would never come. I was already mapping the next one. Not for vengeance. For legacy. The kind built not with applause but absence. The kind they don't see coming, until it's too late to catch up. The conference was one of those industry summits that people attend to be seen. Polished lanyards. Faux interest panels. Networking lounges filled with forced laughs and limp wine. The kind of event she used to dominate. Flitting between sponsor booths and camera crews like a queen holding court. This year, though, she moved differently, slower, more cautious. Like someone unsure if the room still remembered her or had quietly agreed not to. She wasn't even supposed to be there. Word was she had taken time off. The vague euphemism reserved for executives under quiet investigation. But curiosity is a drug. And something about the event, maybe the theme, maybe the guest list, had drawn her out. She wasn't on the speaker docket. I stood near the back of the staging area, reviewing final notes, earpiece tucked, mic clipped, scanning the room not for validation, but for precision. I wasn't there to posture. I was there to anchor the next quarter's momentum. Keynote slot. Headlining session. Name printed on the badges of interns who'd never even heard of her. But she saw me first. She hesitated when she noticed. At first, I thought she'd keep walking, fake a phone call, duck into a side booth. That would have been smarter, cleaner. But delusion has a way of insisting on relevance, even when it's expired. She changed direction, cut through the crowd like she used to, all grace and intention, then slowed as she approached. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her tone was almost humble. Not quite apology, not quite demand, but coated in that old perfume of entitlement. She wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, like she hoped nostalgia might cash a check her reputation no longer could. I turned toward her, cool and still, measured. "About what?" She blinked, paused. "I was wrong," she said finally. Just those 3 words. Waited. Rehearsed. I nodded. Then, flatly, "You were loud, too." Her face cracked, just a little. Not enough to break, but enough to show. Because she knew exactly what I meant. The performative cruelty. The boardroom theatrics. The laughter. Not just the mistake, but the volume of it. She hadn't just been wrong. She'd made sure everyone knew it at my expense. Now, the room didn't even glance at her. No reporters. No PR photos. No panel invites. Just muted footsteps and forgotten name tags. Behind me, a staff member tapped my shoulder. "They're ready for you, Mr. Mayfield." I turned, adjusted my blazer, stepped onto the platform. Her eyes followed me the entire way, frozen in place as the announcer's voice echoed across the hall. Please welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, lead strategist at Novasys, Thomas Mayfield. Applause. Flashes. A row of execs rising to shake my hand. And her? She stood near the exit. Alone. Unrecognized. Still holding the echo of a name she used to say like it was beneath her. I didn't look back. Because what do you say to someone who only sees your worth when it no longer benefits them? Nothing. You walk forward. And let the silence do what it always does best. Finish the sentence she never had the grace to start.